United States of America in 1968 was a land in torment and chaos. A crisis of confidence was shaking the nation. An incredibly complicated set of problems lay in wait for the man who would next occupy this house. Richard Nixon, 1968. A man of deep experience as congressman, senator, vice president. He recognized the problems and was prepared to attack them.
I don't promise that we can eradicate poverty and end discrimination and eliminate all danger of war in the space of 4 or even 8 years, but I do promise action. A new policy for peace abroad, a new policy for peace and progress and justice at home.
He will come to the presidency with a carefully conceived, thoroughly charted program. His method will be strikingly suited to the complex tasks that confront him. He will meet each issue with deliberation, weigh all the evidence, think through to his decision, and then act. This is a man committed to change, but change without chaos. He moved to reshape an American foreign policy tied to outdated Cold War issues. The president set out to change the role of the United States in Vietnam, where massive involvement had become an American nightmare. He was quick to see and attack the problems of poverty and lack of opportunity in an affluent land. He saw that the welfare system was a disastrous mess and insisted it should be replaced. To save the corroding environment, he marshaled the forces of government against the malignancy of pollution. A massive assault was launched against crime and drug abuse. The cost of living was skyrocketing. Take-home pay was shrinking. This had to be stopped. The problems were many, the need for action urgent. Yet the president's carefully planned timetable met with frustrating roadblocks. The bulging federal bureaucracy was more and more tangled in red tape. In Paris, generous offers were made to settle the Vietnam War, but the other side refused to negotiate seriously. Congress delayed some of the president's most important initiatives. At one point, more than 90 of his major proposals were held up.
We have basically a Democratic Congress here, and you have a Republican administration. In order to get anything through, there has to be sometimes some kind of an agreement.
As agreements are hammered out and roadblocks overcome, the president's plan begins to make progress toward reality.
Now, as is usually the custom, I will sign this with one pen, but in spite of the fact that this is one of the rather larger groups for a signing ceremony, I have pens for everybody who is here, and particularly pens for the members of the House and the Senate who are here, just to remind them that when they support a bill, they get a pen.
Where new strategies are needed, he develops them. When he can act on his own, he acts. Before his presidency, there were 549,000 United States troops in Vietnam, and more Americans were marching into the bloody jungle war every day. The president's plan is firmly based on dedication to building a lasting peace.
The third time I photographed you, Joe.
Yeah, where did you do it before?
Alaska and Denver.
Where is it? Alaska.
You're following me around.
Yeah, that's right. I've been doing it. We got to find out who's in charge here.
After a decade of involvement in Vietnam, the troops at last are coming home. By mid-1972, 500,000 men, over 90% of the American troops in Vietnam, had been withdrawn. Yet the president will not be satisfied until every American is safely back home.
Abandoning our commitment in Vietnam here and now would mean turning 17 million South Vietnamese over to communist terror. It would mean leaving hundreds of American prisoners in communist hands with no bargaining leverage to get them released.
To their wives, the president has promised he will not rest till they return. While withdrawing American forces and helping the South Vietnamese to help themselves, the president explores every possible path toward peace with honor. With assistant Henry Kissinger, he probes private channels of negotiation. Under the Nixon administration, an unfair draft is reformed and replaced by a new lottery system. Privileged exemptions are eliminated and draft calls are reduced. The president then orders that no more draftees are required to go to Vietnam. He reverses the basic priorities of the United States government. For the first time in 20 years, more of the federal budget is spent on human needs than on defense. To reinforce his assault on crime at state and local level, the president increases tenfold the financial support for the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. The rate of increase in serious crime is the lowest in 10 years, and in 80 major cities actually reduced. The problem has not vanished, but real progress is being made. Criminals are being driven off the streets, and a new respect for the law is growing throughout the nation. Traffic in illicit drugs is so serious, its control becomes a policy of the Nixon administration.
The joint announcement that is being made at this time in Washington and in Ankara represents by far the most significant breakthrough that has been achieved in stopping the source of supply of heroin and in our worldwide offensive against dangerous drugs. 60% of all of opium poppy, which is, of course, the raw material from which heroin is made, is grown in Turkey. As a result of negotiations that have been taking place, the cultivation of opium poppy in Turkey will completely cease within 1 year.
President Nixon also achieves agreements with 20 other countries, including France, Thailand, and Mexico, to fight production, processing, and transportation of drugs. Every usable resource of the federal government is employed. He creates the Office of Drug Abuse Law Enforcement as the center of a comprehensive drive to eradicate heroin traffic in America. Drug arrests are doubled. 3 times as much heroin is seized. Yet prevention of the flow of drugs through ports like JFK International is only part of the president's program. He has allocated 10 times as much money to treat, educate, and rehabilitate drug addicts.
This is one area where we cannot have budget cuts because we must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number 1 in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
The president takes a down-to-earth approach to problems of poverty, compassion for those in need, a belief in working for a living, a concern that government has promised too much and delivered badly. Food assistance for the needy is tripled. The president's sweeping welfare reform plan would make sure that every American family with children has the basic needs of life. The cost of living continued to squeeze the pocketbooks of all Americans. Pressures of inflation, mounting for 7 years, kept pushing prices higher. Quietly, the president begins a penetrating investigation of economic concepts designed to control inflation. He studies every option, considers every argument, but in the end, the decision is his.
The budget gets totally out of control. If our monetary policy gets totally out of control, all we do in attempting to keep the lid on isn't going to work, it's going to blow right out. It's these basic problems that will determine long run whether or not we are going to control the cost of living in this country.
I am today ordering a freeze on all prices and wages throughout the United States for a period of 90 days. I have today appointed a cost of living council within the government. I have directed this council to work with leaders of labor and business to set up the proper mechanism for achieving continued price and wage stability after the 90-day freeze is over.
Clamping controls on the economy is a difficult decision. Enforcing them is complicated, but the president's efforts are met by the support of the people. To help the sale of American goods and improve the country's position in world trade, a temporary 10% surcharge is imposed on imports. A new international money agreement is hammered out in Washington. By the summer of 1972, The president's policy is producing the best economic thrust in years. Inflation is cut in half. The buying power of the dollar goes up. Although some economic problems still remain, unemployment still exists. The economy is producing more jobs than ever before. The president proposes an important tax reform to Congress. Share federal revenues with states and communities. Put the money where the problems are.
Let us share our resources. Let us share them to rescue the states and localities from the brink of financial crisis. Let us share them to give homeowners and wage earners a chance to escape from ever higher property taxes and sales taxes.
Proposing cuts in federal bureaucracy, he calls for a new American revolution to reform and renew government at all levels. The goal of his revolution is not to destroy the system, but to improve it.
Each of us. Let's face it, most Americans today are simply fed up with government at all levels. They will not, and they should not, continue to tolerate the gap between promise and performance in government.
As a former governor with great sympathy for local problems, Vice President Spiro Agnew works closely with the president in implementing new federal responses to state and local needs.
In his tragedy, Murder in the Cathedral, T.S. Eliot wrote, "Clear the air, clean the sky, wash the wind." I have proposed to the Congress a sweeping and comprehensive program to do just that.
The Nixon administration establishes the first agency the government has ever had to deal exclusively with environmental problems. Tough and realistic standards will reduce pollution of land, sea, and air. Construction of a jet airport in the Everglades is blocked. DDT is almost totally banned. Enforcement is stern. The big automobile companies want a delay in meeting strict exhaust emission rules. The administration says no delay.
Massive busing produces inferior education, and education's the name of the game. When you take kindergarten kids and put them on a bus for an hour and a half, when they got a school they could walk to 5 minutes away, now that's wrong. It's wrong for the white children, it's wrong for the black children. And the thing we've got to do, John, is to keep it out of this racial fight, because, see, one of the problems with massive busing...
For the president, the issue is the quality of education for all Americans.
Together, you know, and to knock down the racial barriers. It's creating hatred and strife, such as we have seen explode in recent months.
There's a study...
We simply aren't going to have that anymore.
A better life for all Americans is the broad and basic goal of the Nixon plan. Especially concerned about the elderly, the president wants Social Security benefits linked to the cost of living. No nation, he says, should forget its parents.
The time has come to close the gap between our older citizens and those who are not yet old. And the way to do this, I believe, is to stop regarding older Americans as a burden and start regarding them as a resource for America.
The president increases government support eightfold. Social Security benefits are increased by more than 50%. The president launches urgent research on sickle cell anemia and cancer. He earmarks $100 million to begin an intensive search for a way to cure cancer, and says he will ask for whatever additional money is needed.
The time has come in America when the same kind of concentrated effort that split the atom and took man to the moon should be turned toward conquering this dread disease. Let us make a total national commitment to achieve this goal.
Main goal of Richard Nixon's program for minorities is to recognize and honor human dignity. He creates new possibilities for those who want to go into business for themselves. This box and furniture business grew after the Nixon program helped owner Al Hollingsworth.
President Nixon is helping minority people through his black entrepreneurship program. In other words, being able to actively survive in a capitalistic system rather than being a reciprocant of capitalism, that being welfare.
With loans he obtained under the Nixon plan, J.G. Carrasco expanded his trucking business.
Without President Nixon's administration that put together SBA, there are a lot of small Mexican-American business that would not survive.
Len Fairchuck turned a small arts and craft shop into a successful toy business with financing from the Nixon program.
Up until recently, no president of the United States, and I'm talking back to the times of the signing of the treaties over 100 years ago, no president has recognized the need of the American Indian people. And this legislation that President Nixon introduced will enable the Indian people to get into business and to provide for their own economy.
In filling government jobs, the president has one basic guideline: get the best people available with no regard for race, creed, or sex. Presidential Staff Assistant Barbara Franklin recruits women for important positions.
I think there is a real and deep concern that the president has that women be given a more equal chance in society today. He said that on a number of occasions, including his State of the Union address, and that was a real breakthrough. What has happened is that we've tripled the number of women in top jobs, and we've moved another 1,000 women into middle management jobs. And this, incidentally, was quite a feat since there was a cutback in the federal workforce going on at the same time. But I think the most important part of this is that most of these women are in jobs that no woman has ever held before.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
For years, Richard Nixon campaigned for a lower voting age. As president, he achieves that goal.
We are certifying the 26th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. That amendment, as you know, provides for the right to vote of all of our young people between 18 and 21. 11 million new voters as a result of this amendment.
He doubles the government's effort for the arts. Andrew Wyeth, leading American artist, is honored at the White House. The president awards the Medal of Freedom to symphony conductor Eugene Ormandy. A warm and wonderful evening at the White House honors Duke Ellington.
Ladies and gentlemen, please don't go away. Duke was asking earlier if I would play, and I said I had never done so yet in the White House, but it did occur to me as I looked at the magnificent program prepared for us that one number was missing. You see, this is his birthday. Now, Duke Ellington is ageless, but would you all stand and sing happy birthday to him, and please in the key of G.
In the art of diplomacy, Richard Nixon's new approach involves the greatest effort ever to establish a unified worldwide foreign policy. On a trip through Asia, the president outlines a new stance for the United States. To the leaders of the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and other friendly nations, he explains that the United States will be a partner with her allies, will not seek to dominate them, nor solve their problems for them. This is the Nixon doctrine: help friends help themselves. The Nixon doctrine calls for continuing consultation with world leaders, especially on the key issues of trade and money and new relationships with communist countries. The president meets with Britain's Prime Minister Heath in Bermuda. At home, he consults with Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau, Israel's Golda Meir, and Japan's then Prime Minister Sato. He goes to Rome to meet with Pope Paul, and to the Azores to confer with France's President Pompidou. Strong links are forged with allies while making new approaches to countries thought to be adversaries. That aspect of the Nixon foreign policy involves developing new communications with communist countries. In 1969, he goes to Romania. The result is the establishment of a new and constructive relationship. But there is more. The president is already moving on his well-planned course to open the walls of communist China. Peking, February 1972. This is the master move in the president's plan to replace confrontation with negotiation. Premier Zhou Enlai awaits the first American president ever to visit China. The occasion is momentous. It reopens a line of communication closed for almost a quarter of a century. And now, out of these conferences can grow a new era of world peace and international understanding. For the president, the meeting fulfills the need he foresaw in 1968, more than a year before his election. He knew and said then that one of the most urgent tasks facing the next president would be the establishment of a new dialogue with the Communist Chinese. At the Great Wall, the president sees one symbol of the gulf to be bridged. Built more than 2,000 years ago and stretching thousands of miles, it is a symbol not only of China's ancient independence, but also of her ancient isolation. Differences rooted in history are overshadowed by the needs of the urgent present. In a meeting with Chairman Mao Zedong, fundamental differences are frankly acknowledged, yet the president remains determined to find a common ground upon which the two nations can build a lasting peace. As the meetings begin to bear fruit, there are agreements which carry substantial hope. The United States and China will expand cultural, educational, and journalistic ties. They will work to begin and broaden trade. Their new lines of communication will be kept open and expanded. They agree that disagreement should be settled without threats of force. Yet the president has no illusions that his visit will wipe out all disagreements overnight. But what is important is that after 23 years, China and the United States are on speaking terms again.
I express my appreciation to my Chinese voice, to Mrs. Zhang. I listened to her translation. She got every word right.
Russia. The next move in the president's global plan is to improve relations with the Soviet Union. He comes to Moscow with a precisely prepared agenda. It is the first time the Kremlin has ever opened its doors for a president of the United States. Too often, summit conferences have been so general that apparent goodwill was soon wiped out by old disagreements. But in meetings with top Soviet leaders, the president seeks and gets concrete results. To the Soviet leaders, the president says that both sides should recognize that there are fundamental and profound differences between the two nations. But he proposes that they give greater weight to their common interest, a mutual longing for peace and security in the world. They have an opportunity in 1972 to begin a new age in their relationship, an era of spirited but friendly competition. Agreements are worked out for cooperation on the environment, space, and technology. The two nations agree to expand trade, and soon a massive sale of grain from American farms to the Soviet Union is announced. A United States company signs an agreement to provide technical assistance to several Soviet industries and to explore for oil and gas in Siberia. While other agreements have far-reaching effects, President Nixon knows that one area carries a direct benefit for the United States economy. New industrial ties can result in 3 million additional jobs for American workers. The most important agreement of all can affect the future of mankind. This is the signing of the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, a giant step for peace. The President knows that this does not eliminate every possibility of conflict, and accordingly will keep America's defenses strong. But like his trip to China, the mission to Russia is a journey for peace. On May 28, 1972, the President of the United States prepares to speak to the Russian people. It is a unique moment in history.
Yesterday, I laid a wreath at the cemetery, which commemorates the brave people who died during the siege of Leningrad in World War II. At the cemetery, I saw the picture of a 12-year-old girl. She was a beautiful child. Her name was Tanya. The pages of her diary tell the terrible story of war. In the simple words of a child, she wrote of the deaths of the members of her family. And then finally, these words, the last words in her diary: all are dead, only Tanya is left. As we work toward a more peaceful world, let us think of Tanya and of the other Tanyas and their brothers and sisters everywhere. Let us do all that we can to ensure that no other children will have to endure what Tanya did, and that your children and ours and all the children of the world can live their full lives together in friendship and in peace. Spasiba и до свидания.
An encouraged nation welcomes the President home from his journeys. Richard Nixon came to the presidency with a plan to bring order out of the chaos he inherited. And he's getting the job done. With his immense energy, skill, and experience, he is changing the government's role in the country and the country's role in the world. Yet he knows he has not solved all the nation's problems, that much remains to be done. And to lead a great nation forward to new greatness, America needs President Nixon now more than ever.